Hi, I'm Stephanie Chase, and I am here with Andy Quildan ahead of Epic Encounters 2. Andy, first of all, how was Epic Encounters 1 for you?
Well, I really enjoyed it. I think it was definitely a different environment to what we're used to. It was certainly it was a bit surreal in many ways, not having a crowd present. And of course, there's always apprehension going into the unknown. But I think as far as in ring, I think it was real good. I think it was very interesting to see how people responded after so much time off. And I think it had some excellent moments within it. I think obviously for us as Rev Pro, it was a different style in production, a different style in presentation. And I think overwhelmingly, obviously with all these things and being a small company, we're always going to have production issues. I can't wait for the day where I can say no production issues. But I think looking back at the show, I think that it went as well as it could have done, and I was very happy with the feedback coming out of it. I was very happy with the matches myself. Obviously, first and foremost, I'm a wrestling fan, and just being able to see some good British wrestling was just great. And I had a great time calling the matches with Rob Lyas as well. So it was just good to be back. It took a little while to get in the rhythm of things, but you know, a few minutes into the first match, it's like, yeah, it's good to be back, and we remember what we're doing now.
Yeah, we've seen a few empty arena shows in wrestling like during this period. So what were kind of your worries going into it? And is there anyone you thought really stepped up to the plate in that environment?
So I think my main concerns were I wanted to be able to recreate the energy in the building. And I think that's the main concern in terms of presentation. I've made no secret about the fact that throughout lockdown, all I was doing was watching empty arena stuff, sports. I watched obviously WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling. I watched UFC, Top Rank Boxing. I watched Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing. I watched Frank Warren's, I think, Fight Night Lives on BT Sports. And of course, obviously, being a big football fan, I watched a lot of football as well. And I was kind of just really working out the pros and cons of this empty arena stuff. I thought that for me, the product which translated best was New Japan Pro Wrestling's product to an empty arena, due to the physical nature of professional wrestling. I think the best presentation overall went with UFC, just because I feel that for their broadcasts, yes, a crowd is a great part of that broadcast, but I don't really feel like at the end of it you were ever like, oh, you know, man, I really wish missed that crowd. I think if you watch back shows with crowds now, you'll be like, oh, those crowds do add another dimension to it. But it was kind of unique hearing the corners talking to each other and hearing turn the mics up in the rings and hearing the blows as people got hit and stuff. It was kind of it's a nice, unique environment. What I was keen not to have was I wanted the product to remain authentic. I didn't want it to be, you know, I didn't want to have forced reactions. So to me, that put out fake crowds and pan noises, etc. And it was all about letting the wrestling do the talking. And I think that, fortunately for us with Rev Pro, we're very strongly based on in-ring competition, and as a result of that, it meant that we were able to almost seamlessly carry on doing what we were doing. And in terms of who impressed, to me, I think everyone left it all in the ring. I thought that women's match between Jamie Hayter and Giselle Shaw was as physical came. And that was another one of those where without the crowd, you were able to hear all those blows. You know, some of those clotheslines and forearms from both Shaw and Hayter were big. You know, and there was obviously big performances from the likes of Robbie X and Ricky Knight Jr. And I feel that a special mention has to be given to our contenders, Brendan White and Kenneth Halperny, who I really feel left it all in the ring. And another new learning experience for two men that are very young in their professional wrestling careers.
Yeah, that's how I felt watching it, because without the crowd there, obviously you had the seconds, but it really did seem like a very authentic wrestling product where you can feel and hear every move and everything. I think that really added to it as well. So moving on to Epic Encounters Night 2, you're opening up with Mark Haskins versus JJ Gale. Mark Haskins, obviously a big star. We haven't seen much of him in Pro recently. Well, what was the decision to put him against a more rising star like JJ?
Well, I think for me, it's so important to bring through the next level of competitor. Obviously, it's been well documented, our struggles of retaining talent, thanks to able to the emergence of NXT UK and not being able to use their talents. And I mean, for us, that problem started a lot sooner than it started for many other promotions. Really put an emphasis to me at that point on we need to be making sure we're bringing through the next level in competitor. So that's why you'll see a lot of these youngsters get these opportunities, and don't get me wrong, they're deserved opportunities. Every single one of them are deserved opportunities. Now, I'm fully aware that obviously I could put Mark Haskins with a more established name than JJ Gale, especially considering, where we're at the moment in terms of, essentially we're selling internet pay-per-views and on-demand subscriptions. So yes, I could have put Mark Haskins on with a name which would have sold perhaps more on-demand pay-per-views, and it may cost me a few buys, but the reality of the situation is that we have to start somewhere, and long term is way more important to me in Revolution Pro Wrestling than short term. And JJ Gale is someone who's shown so much potential over the last year and a half or so. And the only way you can get better is by working people more experienced and better than yourself. And in Mark Haskins, you don't get much better than him. Obviously, he's been back at Rev Pro for a few months now, or he just started his run prior to lockdown, really. So we looked at the tail end of last year and the start of this year, and he was a very regular fixture on the shows, and he was set to be a regular fixture going forward in 2020 as a part of the Legion. And unfortunately, the world had other ideas for us, but it's great to have Mark Haskins. He's well-rounded, he's well-versed in every single area of professional wrestling. And he's someone who got given opportunities early, one of a few men who got given opportunities early and rose to the occasion each and every time. So he can relate to being in JJ Gale's situation. That's not to say he's going to have any sympathy for JJ Gale or hold anything back in the contest. But it's very much looking at JJ Gale. You can see shades of Mark Haskins from 10 years ago. And I think that's always interesting and intriguing. But that's the way these guys get better. They work people better than them. They learn from it. They retain knowledge from it. And then they get better moving forward. And I think that that's one of the most exciting things about Rev Pro, is seeing the development of all these exciting talents. And before lockdown, again, I put an ill-fated tweet out at the start of March. It was out live at the Cockpit 50. And I tweeted something along the lines of, I genuinely believe we've got the most exciting and talented roster that I've ever had at my disposal. And I'm so excited to work with them in the future. And when I was saying that, that included guys like JJ Gale, Brendan White, Kenneth, etc. And I feel that they perhaps wouldn't have been given such an opportunity had we not had so many doors close on us. But it's almost like they've been given that opportunity and they've risen to that opportunity. And since day one, I've always, you can look back at what I've said, going back 15, 16 years, I've always said that we reward people who make the most of that opportunity. And now more than ever is a time for, people getting those opportunities. And up and down this Epic Encounters 2 card, you'll see that.
Well, speaking of emerging stars, we've got the next match, the Contenders Division. It's Kenneth Halperny versus Brendan White again. So what can match 2 offer us, and what is it about these two that kind of brings them to the top of the Contenders Division?
Well, I think the spirit of competition brings the best and worst out of both of them in many ways. It's very real that, competitive rivalry, ultimately everyone's competing for a spot on the card. And obviously people know that when they graduate from the Contenders Division, that almost safety blanket of being in the Contenders Division is gone. And all of a sudden they're competing. And it's a case of they're not competing just with one another for a spot on the card. They're now competing with the wider roster. So they're competing with the Michael Okus, they're competing with the Will Ospreays, the Ricky Knight Juniors, Robbie X's of the world. You know, they're competing with the Mark Haskins at that very top level and the spots are limited on the shows. So everyone, and we've already seen with Gabriel Kidd being in this batch of a contenders division, the fact that, you know, he's gone off to Japan and LA and he's training with Shibata, and right now, it was a crazy fact, Gabriel Kidd was the first match back from New Japan Pro Wrestling, the first wrestler to step foot in a New Japan Pro Wrestling ring after this pandemic was Gabriel Kidd. And that's
crazy.
Insane when you think about it like that. And Gabriel Kidd was in essentially the same class as, and don't get me wrong, he had a tenured career before that, but he took a step back. He stripped off all the gimmicks and he went back to the black trunks. He went back to basics, and he put himself in the same class with Sean Jackson, JJ Gale, Brendan White, and now look where he is. And they see that and they want that. And because they've seen that, they know how attainable that is. But then they want to get on the, you know, they want to continue their careers in Rev Pro, and they want to push on, they want to push further. And that just, whilst they're there to help each other and support each other, be a support system to one another, there's a very real sense of competition. When that happens, you know, you see the best rivalries in professional wrestling are people who really are competing to be at the absolute top of their game. You know, you look at the Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, Tanahashi and Okada, you know, the greatest rivalries are really born on that competition. And that's what Brendan White and Kenneth Halperny is. And they each want to get in the ring, they each want to show off, they each want to show the wrestling world what they can do, and they each want to take the next step forward, even if it means stepping over one of their classmates to get there. And it's just, it creates that exciting, intense and hard-hitting environment.
As someone who's really shown himself in Rev Pro and built himself is Dan Maloney, and you've put him now against Joel Redman, someone that we haven't seen in Rev Pro for quite a while. So what was the decision like to bring in Joel and make Dan the one to take him on?
So the reality is, so I told you that about, you know, all the wrestling that I've been watching, and I feel that Joel Redman's style suits that empty arena environment a lot, because Joel Redman's hard-hitting, he's, in terms of in the ring, he's a phenomenal technician. There's not many people who are better on the mat than Joel Redman, and he's a professional that knows how to do the job. And I can't give put enough emphasis on that fact. Joel Redman is a very real deal, and I believe that when we speak about you know, our wrestlers who are coming through, and you know, I've spoken about how when they step in the ring with you know, more experienced pros, they get better. I believe that Joel Redman can very much be a gatekeeper in Rev Pro, and I think that Joel Redman, and that's not to sell him short in any way, shape or form, but I feel that like our younger wrestlers can definitely learn a lot from competing with Joel Redman. I think Joel Redman can still compete at the very top level, and that's why he's going in there straight away with Dan Maloney. I think it's going to be a very interesting proposition for Dan Maloney. Obviously, we saw it at King House as one. He's trimmed up a lot. He's still retained a lot of size, but he's trimmed down a lot, leaned up a bit. And I think that's going to be it's going to be beneficial for him in terms of his cardio. And we know Joel Redman can go for days, and they call him a physical specimen for a reason. And it's going to be beneficial in terms of his cardio, but we're going to see, this is like we saw him against Callum Newman last time out, but this time he's against a real heavy hitter in Joel Redman. So we're going to see how, you know, trimming up has affected Dan Maloney as well. But, you know, Dan Maloney's made his point very clear. He wants to be the top of the game. He wants to be up there, and he wants to be challenging for that heavyweight championship. And if he's going to do that, he needs to beat a diversity of different opponents, from Callum Newman 1 week to a few weeks later going up against Joel Redman, completely different propositions. And we'll see how Dan Maloney fares. But if he's going to be the top, he needs to beat the best, and Joel Redman's certainly one of the very best.
Well, you just mentioned him, Callum Newman. They don't come much younger and much more talented than Callum, so much so that he reminds me of someone, Will Ospreay, his mentor, who he's now going to be facing. So this must be a bit of a dream match for Callum to be able to face Will on this stage.
Yeah, and again, this is just another example of, you know, the younger talent working with the more experienced talent. And the match really came about because Will Ospreay wanted a tune-up match before his big match coming up at Epic Encounters 3 against Kyle Fletcher. And you know, after that tag match, he requested to have a singles contest against Callum, because recognizing the importance of that heavyweight championship defense, Will wanted to make sure he was on point. And to me, if you've got someone like Will willing and able to step into that in singles competition, then what better way to do it than putting him against someone who has a potential to rise to that occasion and give that person an experience very early in their wrestling career. Callum Newman's just turned 18 years old. He's on another level, no pun intended, sorry for nicking your catchphrase, Will, but he's kind of on another level in terms of the stuff he's capable of doing inside the squared circle. And I feel that it's really sink or swim for him. We're going to see what he's made of when he's against Will Ospreay. And again, the two, they train together. Anytime Will's in the country, the two train together. Will first became aware of Callum, when Callum came across to one of his seminars that he was running. And from that point on, Will's taken a vested interest in Callum Newman, because he really said that he saw a lot of himself in Callum Newman. He calls him the second coming of himself. And Will firmly believes that at this age, Callum Newman is better than Will Ospreay was at that age. Now, that's not to say that Callum Newman's going to go on that, is going to skyrocket the same way Will did, because everyone progresses at different levels, and I don't want to put too much pressure on the young lad, but he has a potential to be able to do it. And matches like this, I firmly believe, will be defining moments in Callum Newman's career if he's going to take it to the next level. And yes, they train together. Yes, they know each other's game inside out, and I'm sure Will shared many strategy and many plays to Callum Newman. And I'm sure they've hit each other before, but I can almost guarantee you that Will has never hit Callum Newman as hard as he's going to in this singles contest. Because training and being in a real match environment are two very different things. And that's why it's going to really be sink or swim for Callum Newman. But I've got confidence in him, and I think it's going to be an exciting match, and a glimpse into the future, and maybe reminiscent to the first time that Will Ospreay competed against Ricochet in Sittingbourne all those years ago. And he will compete against Ricochet in front of 250 people in Sittingbourne before competing against him in front of thousands in a New Japan Pro Wrestling ring. So could this be one of those times when 4 years from now we look back when Will Ospreay and Callum Newman are smashing it at the Tokyo Dome and say, their first singles competition was in front of no fans at Rev Pro. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a real it's a real point historical matchup, I believe. If Callum Newman's career trajectory goes the way that many people, including myself, predict it's gonna go.
And your last show was headlined by an incredible women's match, Jamie Hayter versus Giselle Shaw. This time, Jamie's teaming up with her good friend Bea Priestley, and Giselle has the much younger rising star Aaliyah James in there. So with Bea and Jamie being so established and Giselle being your champion, how must this feel for Aaliyah to be stepping into this situation?
Well, again, it's a case of that younger talent stepping up, isn't it? Having those experiences that perhaps they wouldn't have outside of here, and I feel that Jamie Hayter and Bea Priestley as a tag team, I would go as far to say is the best female unit in the world. They are a real tag team. They're not two singles wrestlers thrown together. They've chosen to be a real tag team alongside each other, of course, competing predominantly for Stardom in Japan. And they're training partners, they're housemates. They do everything together. Like a real old school tag team, those tag teams find success. And I think they're in with a shout of redefining the tag team division in terms of the women's division, because I feel that a strong emphasis is going in the women's division in Rev Pro, and we've really been trying hard, for a long time now, trying to establish that women's division. I feel for the first time, in a long time, we have for the first time perhaps ever in Rev Pro, we have it's not just one or two women at the top. You know, we have a real women's division. We have women bubbling underneath, ready to go. And I feel that, you know, it's a great opportunity for Jamie Hayter and Bea Priestley to redefine tag team wrestling in the UK for women's wrestling. And I think for Aaliyah James, it's only going to benefit her career being in the ring with experienced professionals. She's on, I can't remember the match number she's on. She always tells me before she goes in what match number she's on, but it's less than 40, you know, in her wrestling career. So to be competing at that high level now is only going to help her. And I say to everyone time and time again, it's going to take hundreds of matches before Aaliyah James is at the top of her game, which is great because where she is right now, you know. So imagine where she's going to be 100, 200, 300 matches down the road. And hopefully with Rev Pro, we can play the part in accelerating her, you know, her development and giving her the match time, the in-ring time that she needs to become a top professional. And yeah, and like you say, that match between Giselle and Jamie at Epic Encounter 1 was it was physical, it was hard hitting, and they didn't hold anything back. And I'm not expecting this tag team match to be any different whatsoever.
And your headlining match, it's a big one. It's a unification match. The speaking champion, Ricky Knight Jr., he's taken on the Cruiserweight champion, Michael Oku. Michael Oku is someone we're so familiar with, but Ricky Knight Jr., like he seems extremely hungry right now, really, with something to prove. Is he going in kind of the maybe underdog favourite?
Well, I think it's hard because when you've got a championship match and both men are going in as champions, of course, we unify the Cruiserweight Championship and the Speaking Championship. It's very hard to call someone an underdog. I mean, you could pick apart the match in a number of ways, and you could say you look at size, you look at height, you look at speed. You know, every attribute in, you know, that you look for. Ricky Knight Jr. probably defeats Michael Oku in terms of, you know, if you're looking at the wrestling Pokemon side of things, you know. However, one thing that Michael Oku does have, and he has in spades, is that heart, grit, determination, and the way to find victories when people think it's improbable and perhaps impossible. You know, Michael Oku's been written off more times than I can remember, and he always proves his doubters wrong. He's got a work ethic second to none, and I genuinely believe, you know, Michael Oku's story in Rev Pro is insane when you look back at it. His rise, I mean, I guess he made his Rev Pro debut officially about 2 years ago. And he started off almost as an extra, you know, when we were doing our TV tapings, but he got that role through his hard work. He got that role through coming down, helping out, set up the ring, being the first guy at the building and being the last guy to leave, help setting up the ring, help with merchandise, help taking tickets on the doors, help sweeping the ringside area, whatever it was, you know, taking the wrestlers' jackets to the back, you know, whatever it was, whatever the job was, it was never beneath Michael Oku. He had a work ethic second to none, and he worked his way onto Rev Pro shows. And he was originally set to be in this series of the Contenders that we have right now. He was that was his destination. And in the lead up to kind of, you know, having the Contenders division, we trialed a number of our wrestlers at the Contenders out on our shows. You saw Brendan White compete in Northampton, I think, was where he kind of had his tryout. There's a few other wrestlers who had tryouts that didn't quite, you know, cut it and get into the Contenders division this time around. But Michael Oku had those tryouts, and they went so well that each time I thought, oh, maybe Michael Oku would fit in well in this environment. Maybe Michael Oku could have a good match here. Maybe Michael Oku could have a good match there. And each and every time he delivered, and then it became a case of, hang on, why are we putting in this guy who's got a clear connection with the crowd? Right now, he's got this clear connection with the crowd. Why are we putting him in the Contenders division and trying to strip back everything that brings him to the dance? He's not the, you know, in terms of technique, in terms of, you know, flashy moves, he's not there for those things, you know. That's not what adheres him to the crowd, you know. It's like I say, it's just that fighting spirit, that grit, that determination, and you know, and unlike many new wrestlers, he doesn't go 100 miles an hour when he's in the ring. He takes his time, and because he takes his time, he doesn't make some of the fundamental mistakes that we see many young wrestlers make. So it's insane, right? When you just look back at his story. So I just don't think you can write Michael Oku off at all. But then on the flip side of things, you look at Ricky Knight Jr. and, you know, what more can I say about Ricky Knight Jr. that hasn't already been said? I think he's British wrestling's best kept secret. He's been doing this, you know, I think he probably learned to lock up before he could walk. I think that's a real fact. You know, he's got wrestling in his blood, literally. You know, everyone knows his lineage in the Knight family, granddad Ricky Knight, his dad Roy Knight, Zebra Kid, you know, uncle Zach Knight, his aunt Paige, you know, like everyone knows the story. Everyone knows the story of the Knights, but Ricky Knight, I'm telling you, Ricky Knight Jr., and this is a big statement to make, but Ricky Knight Jr. is the best of every single one of them. He's I don't know, I can't, you know, everything. You can't out-quick him, you know, he's hard hitting, he knows the ring inside out. You know, he might be younger than Michael Oku, but in terms of, you know, I said about Leo, it's about getting the reps in. He's got those reps. I think even though he's a young man, a very young man in the sport of professional wrestling, I think he's years ahead of many other professional wrestlers at his age, purely because of the fact that he essentially grew up inside a wrestling ring, and perhaps that does give him an edge. You know, he's had those big match environments. You know, he's had those main events, but so's Michael Oku. So again, it's a pick and match. Any man can win. I think that any man that wins will be a great representative for the Cruiserweight division. And one thing you have to look at with Ricky Knight Jr., of course, he pinned Will Ospreay last time out. You've got to be thinking, perhaps is he looking in too many different directions? That could be his downfall. But you know, I think that ultimately Michael Oku's goals are being good at professional wrestling. Very simple. You know, he wants to be good. And being good, the byproduct of being good is winning championships. So he's won the British J Cup. He's won the Cruiserweight Championship. Now is he going to unify that Cruiserweight Championship with a Speaking Championship, or will Ricky Knight spoil that almost fairy tale story for Michael Oku? I think can't think of two more deserving men to compete for that accolade, and it's going to be good.
Well, it's an absolutely stacked card, and you're already coming off a fantastic show. So just for some closing words, what can you promise for fans to get them excited for epic encounters too?
Well, what I can promise fans is just some top quality British professional wrestling. I think that, you know, I think that's what's been sorely missed during the last few months. You know, it's great seeing, you know, Thunderdomes and, you know, stuff like that. But like at the end of the day, you know, well, I know personally, and again, I can only speak for myself as a fan, right? The reason why I love professional wrestling is because of those key words, professional wrestling, right? In-ring competition. And obviously there's always that fondness of seeing homegrown professional wrestlers compete at the top level and showing the wrestling world. This is great in the sense of, obviously, it's really exposing Rev Pro to a worldwide audience. And, you know, the buys for our first show were head-to-head, USA and UK, head-to-head. So I think that's it's great in that respect to see, you know, the world starting to get to know these guys and girls who are, quite frankly, at the top of their game. And I think that when we do, especially with, you know, some of the, for example, the WWE, even like look at WrestleMania, you know, the WWE empty arena stuff before Thunderdomes, you know, with that so recent in our minds, and we see our wrestlers compete at that, you know, at that level and beyond, I think that it's really a rude awakening. The difference between us and the largest wrestling promotion in the world is essentially a big budget, you know, and I think that we're stripping it back. It's back to basics, and it's exciting, and it's something which is so different. I hope that this series of shows is the only time we ever have to do empty arena shows. We have the setup now. We have the resources. We have the best practice and knowledge. You know, we have the game plan to make these empty arena shows work for as long as we need to make them work. But you know, we do miss the fans. We really miss the fans being there live. But the next big thing, next best thing is being able to watch it with a load of other fans at the same time streaming on Fight and really get used to again having that experience of watching British wrestling with not knowing who's going to win, with not knowing what's going to happen next, and you know, and being wowed by the athleticism, and really for those 2 hours that the show airs, just having that sense of escapism that you're not going to, you know, you're not going to think about the real world for those 2 hours. You know, that's what we want to be able to achieve. You know, because I strongly believe that entertainment, the entertainment industry, when you look at the war, you know, the one budget that Churchill didn't cut was the entertainment budget. And I think that one of the sad things about this coronavirus has been that, you know, one of the things that's been hit hardest has been the entertainment industry. And who knows if it's ever going to recover. You know, we're in all kinds of talks with venues at the moment, looking at possibilities for getting back in front of audiences. But at the same time, we're in those talks and we're looking at all the challenges that are posed in front of us. At the same time, we're having those talks. We're then looking at what happens if there is a second wave. You know, it's so unknown.
Yeah.
The rules change from day to day. So, you know, it is the whole thing is just unknown. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward from one day to the next. So it's just, for me, it's just important to be able to provide that guarantee of some entertainment, that guarantee of some escapism. And this is an insane analogy, right? But I'm a big soap fan, right? And EastEnders.
Oh, me too.
Did you watch EastEnders this week?
I didn't watch it this week. I'm more of a Corey person.
Well, I do. I like Corey as well, but EastEnders is my personal favourite. But EastEnders came back this week with a bit of a bang, and it was just not, because obviously the other soaps hadn't come off of our screens. Obviously, Emmerdale did things differently. Here we are talking about soaps, right? Emmerdale did things differently. Coronation Street did things differently. And EastEnders has tried to come back with an as authentic product as possible, obviously with lots of special effects and fast camera cuts, and you know, and the show's now faster paced and shorter as a result of all of this stuff. But just seeing those characters back on the screen, it was just almost like a sense of comfort and reality, you know, as someone who watched it my entire life, you know. And I feel that seeing Rev Pro come back again is that sense of, for me anyway, it's that sense of normality, that sense of, okay, things aren't quite the same as they were before all of this. They may never be the same again, but we're giving as good a representation of an authentic Revolution Pro Wrestling product as we can give, and we're using this time off to strengthen our product. So, you know, again, just little things like everyone had their own music. So like, obviously this is something we've toyed with in the past, and then as new characters come, we're just like, oh, we'll just let them use their music or whatever. But everyone had their own copyright-free music that's been paid for and bought by us, and that's like a big step forwards, because now these shows are accessible to any market. So any TV station could take them at any time with no legal worries or concerns, you know. So stuff like that, you know. The COVID stuff, again, so important, the health and safety precautions, you know, this has been an excellent dry run for when we get back in front of crowds, because I think people, I don't know, like when we get back in front of crowds, it's not, COVID-19 is not going to have gone away, you know, so we need to develop a best practice, and it's much safer to develop a best practice amongst a very small bubble of people than, you know, than increasing that bubble, you know. And now I feel like we've got best practice. If we do the empty arena shows again, we've got, you know, we would do things slightly differently as a result of best practice. And I think that, you know, stuff like that, learning experience is so exciting to be able to do stuff like that, strengthen our product, strengthen the brand, and just keep moving forward with what we're doing. And I think that there's a real feel-good atmosphere amongst all the wrestlers, and I feel that, you know, it's been so important for them, because obviously they've lost their identity throughout all of this, their identity as performers throughout all of this. So to be able to just for a few days get back to being professional wrestlers was very important for everyone, and it's given a sense of purpose, and I think that's why there wasn't many missteps. That's why when you watch these shows, you're seeing everyone putting their best step forward. And that's why you know, you won't see people holding back because there's not an audience there or giving that instant reaction, because people are just so excited to be back and refreshed and energized, because they've given their bodies a chance to rest for the first time in God knows how long. And I think that that's why these shows are just so exciting. And it was a thrill to be a part of them. It's a thrill to be a part of them moving forward. And I love seeing feedback, and like I say, the presentation, we try to do things differently, and so many, you know, adding elements such as yourself, Steph, you know. And I think that these things are, they're almost learning processes, and as we move on time, we will get things better, we will tighten things up, and it's so, to me, like there's nothing more exciting than being a part of this process. You know, anyone who's been with me since day one will be able to tell you, you know, from ground level up, from, you know, working in front of 50 people to a few hundred people, to working in front of 1,200 people at York Hall, to being a part of the organisation of that Royal Quest show at the Copper Box. You know, all of these different experiences and seeing the development of everyone has just been so great. And this is just another chapter in our story, you know, and we're walking, we always walk before we can run, but we're not afraid of investment. These shows had such a huge deal of investment in them, and we're not expecting to get a return on that investment overnight. But this is a long-term play, and you know, our intentions are for good. Our intentions are to produce great professional wrestling and entertain people at home. And I sincerely believe that anyone who purchases the pay-per-view on Fight will be entertained. And obviously, let's not forget, the show will also be on rpwondemand.com before the end of the following week. And really, I just say to people, if we look at it like this, look at the presentation on Fight, look at that like a live show ticket, and RPW On Demand, look at that as RPW On Demand, like it's always been. But we do need your support. So please watch the show on Fight, subscribe to rpwondemand.com, buy some merchandise, and just join us for this journey, because it's an exciting one. And and I'm glad that for everyone who can be a part of that journey.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. As we said, it's such a stacked card. It's full of so much talent, and I for one, am really excited to watch the show.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for giving me your time, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully we can do it again before the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andy.